I'm Don Miller, and this is Florence Hessing. We live up here in Bayfield, Wisconsin. It's way up in the northern part of Wisconsin, right by Lake Superior, the coldest and the deepest lake of the Great Lakes.
Ever since they,
You could vote every election.
yeah, every election I've voted. I've never had any problems.
Until now. When Donald read about Scott Walker's new voter ID law, he knew 95-year-old Florence could have trouble fulfilling its requirements.
Well, they wanted a photo ID to vote up here, but her driver's license run out. She stopped driving at 90.
Most people in this situation would just go to the DMV with their birth certificate to get a new one. For Florence, it's not that easy.
She don't have no birth certificate, so she wrote where she thought she was born, and they got no record down there. So she must have been born by a midwife.
I believe so.
There is an estimate, University of Wisconsin political science professor did some research on it and tagged it at about 300,000 people across the state who might have difficulty getting an ID.
So what does this mean for all of us come November? Well, to answer just that, with me now is, to get to the bottom of it, is Megan Carpentier, executive producer or director from The Raw Story. Hi there, Megan. So first question, I show my ID several times a day to pay for my groceries, to get to a bar, to get into certain buildings. So what's wrong with showing your ID when you're voting? I mean, after all, it is a sacred American right.
Well, I think that's the difference. It isn't a right to go to a bar. It isn't a right necessarily to buy groceries, unfortunately. It is, however, one of the fundamental rights of this country to vote. And unfortunately, when you look at some of these voter ID laws, it isn't as easy to get an ID as you might expect, because of course some people can't get driver's licenses easy. You have to go to the other side of town, to 2 towns away. You have to have transportation. You have to have time off of work. You have to go during business hours. Maybe you can't get the time off because of the job you had, or you can't afford to take the time off. And then, of course, if you look at some of the things you need to do to get an ID, you have to have a Social Security card. If you don't have a Social Security card, what do you need to do to get a Social Security card? You need to have ID. Or you need a passport, for which you need a Social Security card, for which you need ID to get in the first place. And it's this self-reinforcing cycle that once you don't have one, it's very difficult to get one.